Welcome everyone to tonight's tasting for Saburomaru. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The majority of Japanese that I have is how to order food, which is the most important part. We are joined tonight by Michael, the master distributor for Saburomaru in Asia, and Raphael, who's helping bring these whiskies into Australia. So it's very exciting. Michael works with brands like Elixir Distillers, Bimber, Santis Malt, the Whiskey Agency, and one we all might be familiar with here, M&H Distillery. But he also helped translate the Chinese edition of Whiskey Rising, which is a fantastic book about Japanese whiskey. Well worth a read. The guys at Whiskey and Helmet use it as a reference guide all the time. It is absolutely fantastic. But before we get into talking and tasting and all the fun stuff, obviously there's the important housekeeping to go over. We recommend having 5 glasses with you so that you can go back and compare each dram if you have the glassware for it. If you don't, like me, totally fine. As usual, please don't drink and drive afterwards. These are all quite low in alcohol, but we always encourage responsible drinking. All of our tastings are recorded as well for those who want to watch them back or who are unable to join us tonight. And a general overview of the brand is up in the featured brand section of the TWL website as well, if you wanted to give that a read. And as always, we love to see your tasting notes and questions. Please pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to get answers for all of them. I think that's enough from me now. Michael's got a fantastic PowerPoint to showcase us to talk more about the distillery and the whiskey. So I will hand it over to Michael to start us off and tell us about Wakatsuru Saburomaru Distillery. Hopefully pronunciation was okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Hsieh. I'm from Taiwan, and today I'm gonna introduce Saburomaru Distillery to everyone. So this is the. Is everybody seeing this presentation file? Okay. Cool. So you can see that the Saburomaru. This is the main building of the distillery, and it resembles of what you see in Isla from the Isla distillery, like a Ardbeg, like a Woolen, because the owners of Saburomaru distillery have a dream to making a Isla whiskey, Isla type of whiskey. So he make his distillery look like Isla distillery from the outlook. Oh, so and this is their entrance. They say Yokoso Saburomaru Juryosho e. So this is welcome to Saburomaru Distillery. And they just recently have a movie, animation movie in Japan, which is they actually talking about Saburomaru Distillery. So now the distillery is very popular in Japan, in Taiwan, and soon the movie will be played in Hong Kong and Macau. So I'm not sure if you can see the movie, but soon I think that in Asia, people will be talking about Saburomaru a lot. So this is the entrance. If you have a chance to visit Japan, it's very convenient to go there. And from the history side, Wakatsuru Suzo is the mother company of Saburomaru Distillery. It was founded in 1862 and started making whiskey from 1952, which is a long time ago. They ever released a 55 years old Japanese whiskey 2 years ago. And that broke the record because at that time, Yamazaki only had 50 years old. Karuizawa only had 50 years old. But they, Saburomaru, they released a 55 years old, which is make the oldest whiskey in Japanese whiskey history. And in the past, they only make whiskey for 3 months in a year in summertime. And during the winter time, they make Japanese sake, they make soju, the type of Japanese wines. And the equipment upgrade actually from 2017. I will talk about this later. And production season because of they're getting more and more popular and people are demanding more whiskey from them. So they start to increase their production season to 9 months from 2022. And last year, they actually produced 10 months. So they filled total 700 casks in a year, which is still very small compared with those big distillery in Scotland. And this is the founder, not founder, this is the CEO and distillery, the managers of the distillery. It's called Inagaki Takahiko. And he's the fifth generations of Wakatsuru Suzo. Uh, if you have a chance to look at the movie, the character, the main character actually have the same history. And Takahiko-san, he actually joined Wakatsuru in 2015. Before that, he worked for IT industry in Tokyo. But he got to come back and take over the family business. So he went back in 2015. And by the time he went back, actually the distillery is in a mess because they are not very focusing on making distillery at that time. So he decided to do a reforming, to transform the distillery, replacing the mash tun, replacing the pub stills. So he do a lot of job to make sure the distillery can be up and running. He even designed his own pub still. So later I will talk about this pub still. And in 2 years ago, he got promoted to Wakatsuru CEO. So as I say, his objective is making early style, Isla style smoky whiskey. So tonight, I'm sure when you taste their whiskey, you will have feel like it tastes like old Ardbeg. Not that Mendocino, but the smokiness is very similar to what the old Ardbeg tastes like.
Yeah. I'll
And
I'll
yep,
pop in the chat a link to a Japanese blog as well, which talks about the movie called A Whiskey Family. So if you guys wanted to click on the link and watch the trailer later on, you've got that
yeah.
there.
And there's some new whiskey coming. Persona is actually the video game, very popular in Japan, in Asia. So they co-work with Saburomaru to have joint bottling for this one.
So this is the first whiskey that we're tasting. So the Ex Persona Saburomaru blend is this a blend of Japanese and Scottish whiskey? Is it?
Yep, yep. This is blended with Saburomaru's whiskey, 8 years old, non-peat whiskey, and 12 years old grand whiskey from Scotland. And the grand whiskey is actually slightly peated. So this one is actually, the peat level is pretty low. So because tonight you're gonna taste 5 whiskey. This is the lowest peat level among all. And later, when you go into other ones, the peat level will be increased. This one is pretty light in peat.
Yeah. So was it a bottling of two different whiskeys for the video game?
Yeah, actually, there are 4.
Oh wow.
There are 4. Yeah, the left hand side is actually a blended whiskey, which is the one that you're gonna taste tonight. And the one with blue color, that is a single cask. That is single
Oh,
cask. And there's 2 other single cask released last year. So I'll try to make sure that you can have a chance to taste them.
yeah, it's awesome.
Hmm.
For everyone in the chat, please pop your tasting notes in. I'd be curious to see. And actually, raise your hand if anybody's ever had Old Ardbeg. I know it's a bit of a long shot nowadays. Well, Richie, yep. All right, not super many, but yeah, it's definitely like that 20-plus-year-old Ardbeg where it like softens off, but yeah, Ian says it's like Ben Nevis rolled up in silage, but yeah, very exciting. And please go on. I know
Okay.
that Very exciting map of Japan coming up.
And then I think what people might not know outside of Japan is that now the distillery number in Japan is increasing a lot. I think if you look back on 1985, there are approximately 30 distillery working, active distillery in Japan in 1985. So this is a list. But when it comes to 2014, there were only 9 distillery active at the time, so which is pretty bad. But now there are more than 100 distillery active in Japan now. A lot of old Suzo, which is making Japanese sake, they turn to make whiskey because of the Japanese whiskey now is booming. So those old Suzo, those old distillery, they think that, okay, maybe our future is rely on whiskey. So a lot of them turn back and want to make the whiskey. So if you look at the current map, if you have a chance to read the Whiskey Rising, the new edition, you will see that there are actually more distillery than you can imagine. I would say that now is more than 100 distillery now in Japan. So it's pretty amazing. Such small places that have so many distillery. So to give everyone's idea about their product lineup, their expressions, they have the single malt line, and the upper line, you can see that a lot of tarot card. They actually they try to make a 22 the series will have 22 bottles. So they have all the big cards from tarot card. So today I think we're gonna taste number 2, right? Number
Um,
2 is
so,
High Priestess.
so whiskey number 2 today is the Sun blended.
Okay,
So yeah, was the Sun part of the Taro series or is it
no,
another?
they
Oh,
that is the let me look at the list. The Sun is a blended whiskey as well.
okay.
So actually, the High Priestess is number 2, Saburomaru 2, which is your number 4 tasting item will
Yep.
be a single malt.
Okay, cool. Did we want to taste that one now or did we want to leave it?
No, I'll let me finish the presentation and then I will leave you guys start the tasting section. Okay.
Sounds good.
So let's have some idea about when you taste their whiskey, you will feel that the differences between the traditional pot still and their pot still. Their pot still name is Cosimo, and the shape is like this. And what the difference is the Zemo is actually a cast copper case. Is not hammer. It's not made by hammering the copper. It's made by cast. So it's very different type of pot still that we can see in Scotland. So the technology is actually from the very, very old Japanese culture. They're making the big Buddha and the big bell. So the same technology they use for making the pot still. So I'm not sure you have, oh, okay. So this type of pot still is quite efficient because if you make an order to Forsyth in Scotland, the lead time is 4 years. You place the order, you got your pot still 4 years later. But for this Zemo, if you place the order to the manufacturer in Japan, you can have your pot still in 6 months because they are making from casting. So it's quite efficient. And because it is a casting, so the thickness is thicker than a traditional pot still. So when you're heating the whiskey from inside, they actually can preserve the heat more efficiently. So which make the liquid, make the whiskey more subtle. So when you taste the whiskey, you can feel the subtleness of this type of pastille. Okay. Let's talk about the technical part. The mashing, they're actually doing 1 ton per batch. And husk, grist, and flour, usually 3 versus 6 versus 10%. They are adding 2 waters system. Now they are using 3 water system, which is technically the mashing process. The fermentation, they are actually pretty long. For Yamazaki, for Yoichi Distillery, they only took 48 hours. But the Saburomaru, the fermentation actually takes 96 hours, which is 4 full days. And the first 2 days, the fermentation was done in enamel coated tun. And the last 2 days is the wooden tun. For distillation, using the Zemo distiller pub still, the wash still, they make 4.5 hours to make the first distillation, and they make it 2 times. Then fit all the wash to a spirit still, then make another 7 hours to get the alcohol. And the heads cut from 73%, the tail cut stop at 60%. So the new mix strength is like 68 to 69%. Okay, the cask filling strength 63.5 and now 60.5. So this is a pretty technical part. For their product lineup, for blended whiskey, they have, because Saburomaru, they only make malt whiskey. So they import grain whiskey in bulk from Scotland and to make their own blended whiskey, which I think is very popular among Japanese distilleries. I'm sure you know that Chichibu also making a lot of blended whiskey. They got the grain whiskey import from Scotland and Canada. Saburomaru too, he import the grain whiskey from Scotland and then blend it with their own malt whiskey. So I think today you're gonna taste the Sun, which is the blended whiskey from Saburomaru. And the malt whiskey, the Sun, they are actually mature by using the Mitsunara cask, Mitsunara and sherry cask. So the malt whiskey is mature in Mitsunara cask and sherry cask. And the grain whiskey is actually mature in the wine cask in Japan. So it's pretty unique, pretty subtle taste. So later, I'm sure you will taste this whiskey. All right. Then this is the single malt that everybody will be tasting tonight, which is called Saburomaru 2, the High Priestess. This whiskey was actually distilled in 2019 and bottled in 2023. It's actually 3 years old only. But when you taste it, hardly you can feel it's that young. You would think that, oh, maybe it's equivalent to 10, 12 years old of Scotch. So I'll leave this to later the session that when you taste this whiskey. And the final part of the presentation is they have another product line called blended malt whiskey, which have malt whiskey from Saburomaru, also other malt whiskey from other Japanese distillery or Scotland's distillery, Scotch distillery. So this product line up is pretty interesting because they want to make the smoky whiskey, peated whiskey. So they also import Scotland, some Scotch whiskey, peated whiskey from Scotch, or they use other Japanese distilleries peated whiskey to make the blend with blended malt whiskey. So this is a pretty interesting product. I think they are coming for the left-hand side, the Far East of Peat. Now they have the fifth batch already. So I'm sure you will have a chance to taste that. Okay, last but not least is the product will soon be ready to Australia, which is a smoky highball product, which is extremely popular in Japan now. Because Japanese have very culture, like they go to the izakaya, they want to eat barbecue and then with highball. So they're making that canned highball. And this product is very special because it's the first smoky highball from the Japanese market. So in the past, Yamazaki or Hakushu, everybody have highball, but not using a smoky whiskey. So this is the first smoky whiskey highball from in Japan market from Saburomaru. So soon you will have a chance to taste this in your area because we are working on the importing process now. So very exciting product, 9% of alcohol, which for me, one I can drink 2 cans, then I still feel I start feel dizzy. But it's very good feeling, very good taste of this highball. Right. So that's end of my presentation. I'll leave it back to Emma.
Amazing, no worries. Well, so I don't know how many of you tucked into the X persona already because I was very excited to try it. I see a few nods. So I think if everyone's already tasted the X persona to start us off, we might move into whiskey number 2 and talk about the Sun blended. So this was the one you said that was Mizunara and sherry cask.
Yep.
Mature?
Yep.
With the grain component, do you know which grain? Can you tell us which grain distillery?
No, it's not disclosed.
Okay, fair enough.
But the grain whiskey was imported from Scotland and then mature in the wine cask produced from Nakano Prefecture. And the ages of the grain whiskey is actually more than 12 years old.
Okay, is that kind of common to use wine cask to mature grain spirit or grain whiskey in Japan?
In Japan, yes, but in Scotland, no.
Yeah.
Most of the grain whiskey mature in barrel, bourbon barrel only.
Yeah.
But they try to make something. They try to make different tastes to the grain whiskey, so that's why they mature in the wine cask. And the wine is actually a local Japanese wine, not from French, not from Italy, those traditional wine country. So they are using a local wine and take the wine cask from them, mature the grain whiskey they import from Scotland.
Yeah, cool. And Michael was asking in the chat, so most of the maturation of the grain spirit took place in Scotland, and then it was a small finish in Japan before blending?
No, for the sons, actually they import the young grain whiskey, maybe 3 years old, then mature on site on their warehouse and until it reached 12 years old or more than 12 years old, then start their blending.
Is that common?
No,
Or
it's not common.
yeah, I didn't
It's not
think
common.
so.
Yeah, it's very time consuming, but that's the way to make sure that your grain whiskey is a special grain whiskey for your own blending. So if you just import the mature grain whiskey from Scotland, then it's just a normal grain whiskey, right? But
Yeah.
they import the grain whiskey like 3 years, 4 years only to Japan and mature in their own wine cask for another 8 to 9 years, which is make the different notes, different taste for their grain whiskey. Then they can start their own blended whiskey, own blending. So when you taste the Sun, you will feel it's totally different from the blended whiskey from Scotland.
Mm. That's really cool. I mean, that's a whole other level of dedication because you're not only crafting your own whiskey, but you're crafting another distillery's whiskey and creating them in such a way that they will marry together one day.
Yep.
Really
And
cool.
for the Mitsunara part, is actually also quite interesting. The Mitsunara, because Mitsunara wood is very hard to make a whole cask body because it tend to leak. The itself is tend to leaking. So the Mitsunara cask they've been using is actually only the head, not the body.
Mm.
So it's the cask head, cask end, two cask end was replaced by Mitsunara wood, and that contribute a lot of Mitsunara taste to the whiskey as well. So it's also another part that which we don't see in Scotland.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's a clever way around the leakiness and the
Right,
structural instability of Mizunara.
right.
Yeah. So Ian said the sun has honeysuckle on the nose and then a lovely peat. I definitely get the like honeysuckle white flowers. But Ian also had a really great question earlier as well. Because Japan has so many different climate zones, do you see certain areas primarily making certain types of either whiskey or spirit? Like, are there regions in Japan, that are more suited to sake or shochu or some other kind of or whiskey, obviously, production? Do you find?
Actually, for Japanese sake and shochu, they tend to produce in a colder place because that kind of liquid alcohol, they don't like the hot weather. They like cool weather. But for whiskey, I think it's all about no, there is no limitation. We have the Norris distillery in Hokkaido, very, very cold place. And also they have distillery in the Kagoshima, is very northern place in Japan. So I think they deliver different type of maturation. So there are special places for good for whiskey or bad for whiskey in general to look at the Japan. Because Japan is quite long country. It's pretty
Mm.
long, cover pretty long area. So I don't see there's a differences. So if you have a chance to taste Akeshi distillery is in a very northern part of Japan. And Kanosuke is in a very southern part of Japan. They taste totally different because the angel share in the northern part of Japan maybe only 1 to 3%, but in the south part of Japan the angel share can goes up to 5 to 7%. So it's totally different. Like in Taiwan, the Calvalan, the angel share is 7 to 10%. So
Yeah.
totally different. Different angel share create different type of whiskey.
Yeah. I always forget how kind of like high up Japan sits in that part of the ocean. I always, for some reason, think it's closer to Australia. I wish it was closer to Australia. But yeah, it is absolutely amazing. And yeah, even on the southern island from coast to coast, the climate is very, very different. So
Yeah, yeah. There's this one. If you look at the latitude wise, that's Taketsuru. When he tried to find a place for Yoichi distillery, he went to Hokkaido. He went to Yoichi because that is the same latitude of Scotland, Speyside. So then you have idea. So that is the same latitude of Scotland. So Hokkaido and the Scotland is almost the same level. So that is so geography wise, you know the place, you know the locations of Japan.
yeah, that's amazing. I like yeah, like I said, it always sits way higher than I think. Even knowing that, I'm like, oh, Scotland's even further away.
Right.
But I love, Michael, your tasting notes, quite sprightly, fresh, some grassy notes, very light smoke on the finish. Well, we might move into whiskey number 3 as well. So this is also part of the blended. This is the Junenmyo Rouge. Hopefully I
Right.
pronounced that right. Like I said, my Japanese is very rudimentary and only enough to get me tori no karage, like fried chicken. That's all I need. So the Junenmyo series,
Junenmyo.
cool.
Yeah.
Junenmyo. All right, I'm gonna be saying that all night. They're another kind of. Are they for? I think I was looking at theirs for a specific market or specific style.
It's a very entry level. It's a very entry blended whiskey from Saburomaru. So they're using whatever whiskey they can get. Their own productions of malt whiskey, then blended with the grand whiskey. This one is actually a pretty young grand whiskey. So it's about 3, 4 years old of age of the grand whiskey. And malt whiskey as well, only 3 to 4 years old. And blended with a bourbon barrel, wine barrel, or sherry cask, bourbon cask. So it's a very basic type of blended whiskey. And Junenmyo is a village, the name of the village close to the distillery. They make the oil for lantern, lighting, the oil for lighting. So the owner, the Takahiko-san, make the name. He say, oh, he want to have his whiskey like the light, like the warm, like the to warm everybody's heart. So it's really Japanese, thinking. So he make the name of the whiskey Junenmyo. So Junenmyo actually have two versions. One is Rouge, uh, and the other is Noir. Noir is a 7 years old smoky whiskey. So black and red, the two colors.
Mm. Yeah, it's so amazing just on the nose. I haven't even sipped it yet, but I get like that hopefully most of the guys know what I mean. The waxiness of the Baby Bell cheese. They're these little cheese wheels covered
Yep,
in
it's very
wax.
cheesy.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah,
cheesy. Yep.
it's like that sweet wax, and then I get like jelly beans as well.
Yep.
It's so cool. Yeah, other guys are getting sweet. Rhett's getting that's very sweet. Sweet toffee on the nose from Ian. Oh, sorry, light and sweet from Ian. Sweet toffee on the nose from John. Yeah, it's. And you said this is around like probably about 4 years for both.
4 years for a malt whiskey, 4 years for grand whiskey. So it's their entry blended whiskey, most entry one.
So is that kind of what you would be recommending people to drink in like a highball outside of the smoky highball?
Yes, this one's perfect for highball.
Yeah.
This one's pretty suitable for making highball. Especially, I think smoky whiskey is good for highball. And when you have a highball and you have and Junenmyo Rouge is actually cost wise have very high cost performance, and it's a smoky whiskey, and then it's pretty sweet, and he got the smokiness. So I think it's very good entry level if there's someone who be interested in tasting a smoky whiskey, that is good whiskey for them. And it's only 46% of the 46% of alcohol. It's not that burn in tongue.
Yeah, it's got a lot of texture to it on the palate, which I think comes from that grain and that youthfulness. Ian reckons it'd be very good for a penicillin cocktail, and I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I think it could, yeah, really support all the honey and ginger notes of a penicillin cocktail.
And for food pairing, I did a lot of testing in Taiwan that the food pairing is very suitable to match with barbecue.
Mm. Well, Richie's just said he'd match it with char-grilled yakitori, and now I'm hungry again. I had a massive dinner of it now. Well, yeah, I've been making onigiri at home.
Okay.
Just simple, but that's what I need to find a whiskey to pair with
Yeah.
stuffed rice onigiri. That would be
Right.
great. But yeah, absolutely amazing. Well, so what are we thinking, guys? Ollie's gonna fire up the hibachi for Richie. Awesome. Well, I think we might move on to the High Priestess, which I'm personally very excited to try. So, um, obviously, you were saying that Saburomaru has been making whiskey for a very long time. Is there kind of a difference between the old whiskey that used to be made and then the more modern production, apart from the Islay influence?
Yeah, actually, they replaced their pot still in 2019, and before that, they're using the old pot still. That pot still is actually not for whiskey making; it's for soju making. So it's not full copper. They have some stainless steel. So not good for making whiskey actually. So when the Takahiko-san he have idea design the Zimon steel, he want to make sure he add more copper elements to his whiskey. So that's why he designed the Zimon pastille and start to using that for making his own whiskey from 2019. So this is the first whiskey that fully utilizing the Zimon pastille and then making in distill in 2019, bottle in 2023. So this is the first whiskey that using Zimon pastille. So actually it's pretty, like I say, it's pretty subtle, very, very fine and smokiness is not that metoxino like the current Ardbeg. It's very, very light. The peat is pretty light, even though the malt in the peat level on the malt is actually 50 ppm. But when it comes to whiskey, it may be only 10 ppm. Very, very light peat.
Yeah, it's so I don't know how to describe it. It's the nose alone, it makes me so intrigued and so curious.
Yeah.
Ian was asking if you know if they still use, so do they use worm tubs and are the stills direct fire stills?
No, they don't use direct fire. They use steam, no direct fire. They never use direct fire for heating up the pot still. And they also didn't use a warm tub for
Hmm.
cooling the distillate. No.
Hmm. Richie says you smell roast tomatoes. I kind of get that too. Just sharing here as well. This is the
Yep.
Demon Stills, a little bit closer up. Um, but yeah, it's super interesting. And it, do you think it's the still that imparts this unusual? Well, yeah. Do you think it's the still that imparts a lot of these flavors in the whiskey, or is it because nobody's ever created stills like this before, have they?
No. This is the first cast steel. It's made by molding. It's not by hammering.
Yeah.
And like I say, because it's molded. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have the file. It's molded, so the thickness is thicker than the ordinary pot steel from Forsyth. So because it's thicker and the heat is actually steam from inside, not outside. So you can preserve the heat inside the steel more efficiently. So if you compare the distillate distill from Zimon and distill from traditional pot still, it's actually more subtle, more fine and subtle and more detailed from the Zimon distillery, Zimon pot still.
Hmm. Yeah, it's super unique.
And imagine that it's only 3 years old. It's not 10 years old. It's not. And partly you can smell the new make smell.
Yeah.
Because if you taste 3 years old from Scotch, it's full of a new make smell. But their whiskey is they can control the maturation and make sure the new make smell is not there, not so obvious.
Mm.
So when you do a blind test, when I do try to give this to some in blind, they can hardly guess this is 3 years old only. They would say maybe 10 years old, maybe 12 years old. Yeah. And I say, okay, this is Japanese whiskey. They say, what? This is not whiskey from Isla. This is the whiskey from mainland, the Highland. It's a peated whiskey. But nobody guesses this is from Japan.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Ardbeg Scorch and the
Hmm.
Ardbeg Hardcore releases, those like really kind of bombastic smoke that still has this sweetness permeating it.
Yeah, sweet.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, super cool. John says it reminds you of the smoked brisket on the nose. Richie, a bit of mandarin in the taste. That is a good call. It's got that like citric kind of citric acid, juicy freshness, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, Minerality, salt. Jan and Chris say the High Priestess is really good. Iris agrees. So light with a nice smokiness. Ian and Richie are on the sun-dried tomato chain. I am allergic to tomatoes, so I cannot say that, thankfully. But yeah, no, I'm definitely getting like, as it's opened up as well, it's got this lovely kind of nostalgic feeling of like old fur coats and like a warmth that's been sitting in a wooden cupboard. It's very interesting. John, you're anaphylactic to tomato as well. Represent. So I'm the worst Greek ever. I'm allergic to tomatoes and I don't like olives. I've been disowned by my family. But yeah, no, that's super, super cool. And I think I remember seeing as well in the slide that the fill strength of the whiskey into cask used to be 63.5% and now it's 60.5%. Was this one of the older fill strengths?
Yeah, this one is the new one.
Oh, okay.
This one, yeah, that change actually happened in 2019 after they start using Zemo. So they think that because the Zemo actually changed the taste of their new make, so they figure out that the filling strength must be lower to make sure that the taste they think that's the best taste when they reduce to 60.5.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
to engage with the cask and engage with the
Yep.
flavors and stuff like that. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's honestly, even when I first heard about the cast still, I was like, this is wild. This is how, I mean, it must have been, so the cast molds for that, are they hard to produce or is it literally just carving out sand?
Compare with those big Buddha, is easier, smaller.
Fair enough. I'm sure the guy who makes them for you is like, oh, sweet, super easy.
Yeah, it's comparatively it's easier. So making like the big bell or the Buddha is even higher, is even bigger. And the good thing about Zemo is that it's easy for them by adding another layer to make this pop steel lot taller. And they can easily change the lean arm if they want to have incline or decline lean arm. They just have to replace the top part. So it's that like a Lego. You can just assemble your own pop steel. One day you want to change the profile of your disc leg, you can change your pop steel. But the traditional one, you cannot change it. You need to keep using, right?
Yeah,
So this fun part. This is the beauty of Zemo Distillery and Zemo Pop Steel.
yeah, that's it's so cool that and you think about distilleries like Loch Lomond, where they have like 7 different stills to do 13
Yeah.
spirits and stuff, whereas this is like, oh, it's an all-in-one. Ian, very maintenance friendly. Yep.
Yep.
Well, we might move on to the final whiskey. Normally we do 6 whiskeys, so I'm like, oh, 5. We've rushed through these. But this is the one I was most interested about. When they first arrived in our warehouse, I was like, what are these? And then immediately my eye was drawn to the Far East of Peat. It's such a cool concept. So if you wanted to tell us a bit more about it.
I believe that you're testing the
Yes.
batch 5, right?
Yep.
That whiskey, the ideas of Far East of Peat, the previous edition, the first batch, second batch, is actually the first batch. They actually exchanged the cask with Nakahama Distillery, which is another distillery, another craft distillery from Japan. They exchanged the cask and then they blend their own whiskey with Nakahama's malt whiskey to make the first batch of Far East of Peat. So it's a cooperation that never happened in Japanese history because Japanese distillery never exchange cask with each other. So if you want your like Yamazaki want to do their own blend, their own peated whiskey, they need to make it themselves. They cannot they won't exchange their cask with Yoichi distillery. So it's not like a Scotland. People exchange cask very often, right? So, but I would say the craft distilleries that's recently set up in Japan, because the owner are pretty young compared with those old generations. So their idea is changing. They say, why don't we exchange cask? Why don't we exchange some experiences? So some new some new distillery like Shizuoka Distillery. Before he set up Shizuoka Distillery, the owner even worked part-time in Chichibu Distillery for 2 months just to learn how to make whiskey. This never happened in the past in Japan. In Japan, you want to learn whiskey? Okay, go to Scotland, go to learn from them. They won't teach their competitor how to make whiskey. But now their thinking is changed. So the first corporations of Far East of Peat is actually with Nakahama Distillery. And then they have 2 types of whiskey. One is Saburomaru plus Nakahama. And the batch 2 is Saburomaru plus Nakahama plus Scotch whiskey. So the batch 1 and batch 2 is like the combination is like that. Batch 3, they actually work with Akeshi, the other distillery, not the Akashi, not Akeshi in Hokkaido. Akeshi is the other one in mainlands of Japan. So they did the same combination. Their whiskey with uh, Akeshi distillery and their whiskey Akeshi distillery and Scotch. So the which make the batch 3 and batch 4. And the one that you will be drinking is batch 5. It's purely Saburomaru and Scotch malt whiskey. So no Japanese whiskey, no other Japanese whiskey inside. Only Saburomaru whiskey and Scotch whiskey. And this Saburomaru whiskey was distilled in 2019 using Zemo pub still. So Zemo also here. So you taste Zemo's whiskey, then Scotch whiskey. So it's a different combination. And the alcohol is 50% alcohol. So this one is pretty malty, sweet maltiness, and no grain whiskey inside. It's a blended malt whiskey.
Yeah, it's incredible. And all the comments started appearing. Everyone was talking about it. Delicious, so much honey in a tart.
Yep, it's pretty much honey. Yeah.
I think I caught sight of John Heyman's face as he smelt it for the first time, and it was exactly how I was thinking. I was like, oh, this aroma is incredible. Ian says it's viscous on the mouth and a lovely finish. It reminds me a lot of my favorite styles of Highland Park. I
Hmm.
love Highland Park in ex-bourbon when it's that honey and that ashy smoke and that little bit of lavender almost as well.
Hmm.
And this reminds me of all of those kinds of things. That
Yep.
is absolutely incredible. Um, Sally, who is Eddie, I believe, says honey smoke so nice. Um, yeah, absolutely amazing. Um, Fantails with a sprinkle of salt. It's a very Aussie thing, fantails. So Ollie's got a bit of a question. So obviously Japanese whiskey has only, I suppose I say recently, but it's been 2 years now almost. Japanese whiskey regulations have come in to really regulate and improve the quality of Japanese whiskey. How has kind of the industry responded to that? Because I know that a lot of the bigger companies had to make some changes when those regulations
Right.
came.
Yeah, I think if you have a chance to read the book, actually they have a long many pages talking about this regulation. There's a new regulations setting up to reform how the Japanese whiskey should be made. Because in the past they are joking. They say, "Okay, I just import whiskey from Scotland and put the Chinese character on the label, then boom, bottle in Japan, then you have a Japanese whiskey." But now this was there a lot of Japanese whiskey maker. They try to think that okay, this is inappropriate because you are misleading the market. So like the Junenmyo Rouge that you just drinking, they don't put Japanese product of Japan on the label on everywhere. But I know some of the Japanese manufacturer still put that kind of product as Japanese whiskey. But I think they have this type of thinking from 2 years ago. They start to have some regulation, but bear in mind that this regulation is not from government. It's only those distillery they formed up, they teams up and say we should have a regulation to behave ourselves. Don't call that product as Japanese whiskey. But the regulation wise still not changed. So by law, if you import Scotch whiskey to Japan and do a bottling, you can still call it Japanese whiskey if you sell it in Japan. If you export that to US, a lot of them actually for rice soju, it can be called whiskey in US by regulation. So actually, there is some whiskey sold in US is not sold in Japan because they are sold it as a whiskey in US. But that one is actually a rice soju. So there is still there's some discussion within Japan, but it's good that there's some big guys like Yamazaki, like Santori Nika, and Kirin. They all joined this group and formed the new regulation. They say we should behave ourselves. We shouldn't call everything Japanese whiskey. Only those who distill in Japan, mature in Japan, bottle in Japan can be called Japanese whiskey. So that is happening, but I would say still someone that working on on the age try to avoid that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. So in Australia, we technically do not have any regulations whatsoever. The majority of people follow the Scottish tradition. The only regulation we have inscribed in law is a maturation of minimum 2 years in wood. Doesn't even say
Yeah.
what wood type. And yeah, I think a lot of places do kind of already follow that, but I don't know that there was one large company that had done some limited edition bottles that were 100% Scotch origin. But yeah, no, it's good to see that it's like starting, even if it's not an official government, having a regulatory body. And what a lot of people might not know as well, the Scotch Whisky Association works with the UK government, but again, they are their own body, and you can sign up to be a member of the Scotch Whisky Association, but you don't have to. So you don't really have to follow their rules, but as long as you keep it within the UK legislation, you can still call it Scotch. So it is, it's not as ironclad, but these things help so much.
Mhm.
Yeah. Eddie's asking what is your view of Japanese distilleries like Saburomaru and Akeshi, where the main products are smoke and peat? Are they still able to infuse the essence of Japanese spirit and energy into their peated Islay style whiskey, do you think?
Yeah, I think yes. If you taste their product line, you can feel that because they are the only distillery that making smoky whiskey only in
Yeah.
Japan. A lot of them only make smoky whiskey after the maintenance or before maintenance, only slight, maybe a short period of time. But for Sapporo Maru, they're only making smoky whiskey. But I think if you taste their single malt, you can feel that it's totally different taste from other Japanese distillery. So I would say that they are finding the right direction and they are staying on the track. They are improving their process a lot because they are new distillery. There's no burden for them. Nobody tell them it should be like this or it should be like that. So they can change everything they want. So change the pop still, change the meshing process, the changing the fermentation times. So they're still young, so they have all the privilege to try every new things. So that's a good thing about that. And then I think the Takahiko-san, the owners of the distillery, he have a view. He know what he's making. So he makes sure he can have his whiskey uh, the way he wanted the whiskey to be. So I think that is good part. So after all these years, 3 years, I taste all their product. They are still on the main focus, making a subtle smoky whiskey, not that super peated peat monster type of whiskey. So I
Yeah.
think they're doing good. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Richie's got a bit of an oddball question, but we might get into the poll while I ask that. Where's the poll? Poll. Alrighty, so you guys can vote for your top two favorite whiskeys, Michael and Raphael. We can see how everybody votes while they're voting. It's kind of like
Mhm.
watching horse races.
Ooh.
And we'll launch the results afterwards at the end. But Richie was wondering if Saburomaru sells casks or if everything is kind of kept in house for now, and it's just all your own release kind of stuff in
They
there.
do. They do. Actually, every year they sell the new cask. Every year there's a program. You pay them certain amount of money, then you can buy the new make filled in the new cask for you, then keep that in your warehouse for a maximum 10 years. There is a program running. I've been running that program for 3 years. So
Oh,
you can
cool.
have your own cask and filled it with the new make that year. So this year, probably the new program will be kick off in June or July timeframe. So you can buy your own cask. Then when you visit the distillery, you tell them that they will move your cask outside to let you sign on the cask.
That's
Yeah, they
awesome.
do. They
I
do.
mean, what a great excuse to go visit Japan. It's for work reasons. I have to go.
Yeah,
I have to go check on something.
yeah. They are pretty close. They are pretty close to Kanazawa, on the north part. Not north part, on the because Japan is like a banana,
Yeah.
and and then in the middle of the banana, in the north part, in the middle of banana is Kanazawa, super seafood, fantastic seafood,
Nice.
and there Saburomaru is close to that area. Toyama area is also a big place, a nice place for seafood. Yeah, good excuse to go there.
Absolutely. I think Ollie had a bit of a hiccup with the poll where he could only vote once. You can now vote for your top two favorites. He's fixed it up now. But yeah, I highly recommend. I've only been to Japan once, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I cannot like overstate how amazing the public transport is. The
Yep.
Shinkansen in Japan is the best to get around with. So it's makes places pretty easy to visit. A few more votes for the virtual tasting. Rob doesn't reckon there'll be any surprises. I think it's definitely, I mean, yeah, I know which one's my favorite. Unfortunately, we can't vote, but I know that my favorite was the Far East of Peat. That's just incredible.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to trying more collaborations. Do you know if there's another distillery collaboration with a Japanese distillery for the next
Yep.
one? Or
Yeah, actually they signed up with 10 distillery already to exchange the cask.
oh,
So I'm sure that in the future there will be more collaboration coming. And then just for everybody's notice that the new tarot card series is called the Empress. Empress will be coming soon. Also, I think next month will be coming to Australia. It's also they're making the using a Zeeman pub still to distill the whiskey in 2020. And that one, if you compare with the High Priestess, is a different taste, different smell, because the new one is using Isla Peat, Isla Malt. And this one, the High Priest, is using Highland, slightly combinations of different peat, different malt for making the High Priestess. But the new one, purely 100% using Isla Malt. So different taste, also subtle peat nose, not that Mendocino. So it's very tastes like Arbeck from early 1990.
yeah, very cool. Nice. All right. Well, drum roll for the poll results. And yeah, pretty much the two that we thought were going to
Amazing.
perform the best. That Far East Peat is absolutely exceptional. And for those asking about the whiskey, where you can buy the whiskey, I have just added in the chat the link to buy a bottle of Saburomaru that we tasted tonight. And Raphael has generously provided a little bonus, I suppose. So if you spend over $200 on the Saburomaru whiskies, you get a can of the smoky highball for free with your order, which is pretty good. Oh, it's on any bottle, no minimum spend. Ollie updating me as we go. It's like, you told me something different at the start. But yeah, I will be, if I could drink carbonated things, I'd be so keen to get my hands on that smoky highball, but I might still get some for my husband for camping over Easter. But that sounds absolutely amazing. And I think that's come to the end of the tasting. These have been some absolutely exceptional and exciting whiskies. I'm so thrilled to finally taste them and to have you tell us about this brand, which I think quite a few people in the Zoom tonight are very excited about and will be keeping a close eye on in the future. Um, but thank you so much, Michael, for lending
Yep.
us your time and your
You're welcome.
expertise. And thank you, Raphael, for bringing this awesome whiskey to Australia. You know, we get often overlooked, so it's great to have some incredible Japanese whiskey here. The offer with the highball can is only for 24 hours, so everyone in the Zoom obviously gets a head start. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We will hopefully see you in the next virtual tasting. But otherwise, have an absolutely wonderful night, and we'll see you next time. Michael and Raphael, if you wanted to hang around for a little bit afterwards for a debrief. But yeah, otherwise we'll say good evening to everyone.
Yep. Okay. Goodbye.